The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Eastlink TV, its sponsors, or partners.
To be here. You are known across the country for your generosity, for your stewardship, for your support of the mission and service of the church, for the fun that you have, and for the fact that you have what I understand is the largest conference annual meeting in the whole country. Just an amazing, yes, cheers. Oh, I understand that the affirming exercises coming up later has left some cards. And so when you hear things like I just said, feel free to hold up the strongly agree card. We'll get you in practice. The other cards behind it we'll have no use for in this presentation. But the strongly agree cards, you're free to hold them up at any time. And if you're shy, I will prompt them mercilessly. So, the question is, what if? What a great question for after dinner, to have some time together and think about what if. I was so delighted when I saw Philip's president's message and the focus on what if. It's the right question to be asking because it is a question that leads to opportunity and for us to really be thinking of what if. Robert Kennedy said, all of us might wish at times that we lived in a more tranquil world, but we don't. And if our times are difficult and perplexing, so are they challenging and filled with opportunity. That sounds like the times that we're living through as a church. It's challenging, and it's filled with opportunity. So this is a what if. And what if, so what if we started every meeting talking about stewardship and M&S and the work of the church with a serious and very serious, heartfelt thank you? What if we thanked one another and those of us at our tables and those of us throughout the room and across the Maritime region for what an incredible job they've been doing, all working together to carry out God's work for the work of the church. I see some strongly agrees in the back, starting to spread. Coming over to this side. Awesome. So if every conversation started and ended with a thank you, and what if we even snuck a few in the middle as we're going through? So today, I just want to spend a few minutes on an example of what if that's here from the Maritimes, and it's quite inspiring. Talk a little bit of a review of our national stewardship work and what we're working on collectively on your behalf and with you, and then just close off with a thank you that I don't hand deliver, I heart deliver from Guatemala. So what if? What if our faith took us beyond our walls and back into a public school? What if 3 faithful grade 5 girls took the Gifts with Vision catalog and used it to share their faith in their school? What if with the work of Pam Harrison, celebrating Universal Day of the Child, the River Hebert Elementary School in Nova Scotia was involved in an act of faith? What if these 3 girls recruited a representative to share their story from every single classroom in the school? And what if in the Gifts with Vision catalog they learned about children in Mozambique and what they needed. And they took eggs and they wrapped a little story of the children in Mozambique and what they need. And they had those eggs go to every class, and from every class to every household in that whole community to talk about our opportunity to help other children. And what if each student with that special egg message inside had a chance to share that and make that their own? And what if each of these students internalized this as a stewardship message? What if at this point in their life, across the whole school, they saw this as a stewardship message through this example? And what if even half of them were affected by it and became better at sharing? And what if the group raised $500 for our M&S partner in Mozambique, taught the children about giving, made them wonder about church, faith, lit a fire? And what if just one of these kids came to church and felt God's love for the first time? And what if, in addition to raising the $500, it taught the children about giving and made them wonder? What if we all took a moment and said thank you to the children, thank you to Pam, and thank you to everyone in the Maritime region that's brought God's work forward through the Gifts with Vision catalog. Thank you. So, I thought that for those of you that after a good supper wanted to have a nap, I would show an unending series of graphs that then you wouldn't feel guilty at all. So we're going to go to the graph section for those that need to have a nap, but we'll go through them pretty quickly. This is the graph that everybody's seen, and some people are famous at circulating these graphs. It shows from 1986 until now. But what if we're looking at a small part of the church? What if, in fact, it's a bell curve that started at Church Union, went up into the 1960s, and is now back? What if, in fact, it's like most of what's happened in North America, from schools to school boards to General Motors to you name it? That was the 60s, this is now. And look in your yearbook. The number of families under pastoral care right now, the church is the same size as it was at Church Union. So what if we're looking at a different kind of a curve that's saying we've gone through 276,000 families under pastoral care now and at time of Church Union? And so what if we were just looking at a piece of it? You know the story about the blind people that are looking at the elephant with their hands. And what if we're just looking at a piece of the graph? And what if there's a piece on the bell curve right now that we're heading into where we're preparing for the church of the future? And that it isn't something where you just take a ruler and draw a line straight down and say, oh, isn't that going to be sad? But in fact, what we're all doing, what Kathy Hamilton here and her whole group and everybody's working on, is preparing for the church of the future while we're doing that. And what if the real story to be told while all of that's happening, the lines going down? Do you see any lines going down here? This is money. So when I started, people said, the Mission and Service Fund, oh, that's a big problem. I said, oh, really? I looked at it, $30 million from 500,000 people, $60 per capita, not per donor, per capita, for every person. What charitable organization wouldn't love to have a campaign that's $60 per capita? I said, well, it must be falling like a stone if you say it's a real problem. That's going down about 1.5% a year, up and down a bit, but sort of on average 1.5% a year since about 2006. It flattened out at 30 million, but it's been going down slowly. I spoke about a month ago in Oshawa, where they closed the last truck plant. General Motors is almost evacuating. They would love things to go down 1.5% a year in Oshawa. And there's a whole lot of communities you know better than I do in the Maritimes that would love things to go down evenly at about 1.5% a year. and have that kind of decline that you can work with and deal with. And so here we've got the graph that says, oh, the $30 million, that's only 10% of it. When we look in the yearbook at the total giving by congregations in the United Church is close to $300 million a year. What amazing generosity. $300 million a year given for community ministry, for the operations of local congregations, to support all of their ministry in their church, in their community, including the $30 million for across Canada and around the world through the Mission and Service Fund. What incredible generosity. So I find it really hard, as somebody who's worked in a number of other charitable organizations, to come here and say, oh yeah, big problem. I come here and say, what an incredibly generous group of people. And then when I tell friends about it, they say, well, just a second, David. You're telling me that they didn't raise the $300 million from the 33 million Canadians. This is actually their own money. So this stewardship is the giving of the 500,000 members of the United Church. It's not what we get all of Canada to give. So it's even more spectacular when you think of the story of generosity that's behind it, a story that should be sung from the rooftops. So when we look at identifiable givers, I was with United Way for 17 years. The only thing driving any of our campaigns in North America was less people giving more. It's what's happening in Canada. It's what's happening with the demographics. Number of donors going down, Cancer Society, Heart and Stroke Foundation, you name it, average gift going up. So what a beautiful story we have. Yes, the number of givers have been going down, but look at the average gift. Look at the average congregational gift going from $400 to over $1,000. So again, an incredible story of generosity. And then if we look at the piece that people don't often look at. So we're heading into the internet world, and there's all kinds of charities, and there's not only all the direct mail, but you can actually get involved as congregations and do wonderful work locally with food banks, with women's shelters, with groups. You can do work across Canada, and you can do work with other groups. And so that's called in the yearbook giving to other charities or other appeals. And look at that in 25 years. That's the light line. It's gone from 2 million to 12 million. So giving outside of the congregation, if we take M&S plus giving to other charities, has gone from about 32 million to over $40 million in the last 25 years. So yes, there's quite a move towards more giving from the congregations. We may or may not say, if we looked at all the numbers, that we had the balance right. It's going to be a good question for us to ask. Certainly when we did the gifts with Vision Catalog, we were trying to tip the balance back a bit. We said a lot of our congregations are using the World Vision Catalog, and we could produce one just as good with our own M&S partners, and church members love it. And so that may be tipping the balance back a bit, and there may be some other things that we can be doing along those lines. By the way, get you to test your arms again. Does anyone like the Gifts with Vision catalog? Did it work at all? All right. And then amidst all of that, legacy giving has continued strongly across the church. It represents in total about 5% of our income, but it's a steady, strong piece. There's up and down a little bit with gift size. But legacy gifts, as you know, range in size from $100 to many millions of dollars. It's the small ones that make up the total every year. It's the modest gift from members of modest means as part of their estate, as part of their hopes and dreams for the future of the church. So we're going to be working on legacy giving more around the hopes and dreams of people's future for the church, and 80% of that goes directly to congregations, as it ought to. So the last line just looks at the 40 million that I was talking about, if we look at the M&S plus giving to other charities. And so people say to me a lot of time, oh, you know, M&S is really flattened out at 30 million and now it's going down. Do you think people just don't have the money? Oh, I said, they have the money. If giving to other charities has gone from $2 to $12 million, the money's there. We're in an era of choice where people have made more choices about different things. Maybe we should be providing more choice in the M&S campaign. Maybe we should be doing more things like Gift with Vision. But I don't think there's a shortage of money.
The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Eastlink TV, its sponsors, or partners.
Now here's the potential for M&S. Imagine out of the people that give to the church, that give that $300 million, only 45% of them give to M&S. So 55% of the church members in the pews do not support M&S. And so as Ivan was saying, if that 55% only gave $5 a month, probably most people can afford $5 a month, if they only gave $5 a month, it would be $8 million. And so what if the 45% participation in M&S went up and grew every year and started to grow? And what if we had an opportunity for everyone, we'll talk about it in another minute, but everyone that has been giving to M&S, what if they took on the job of getting a new M&S donor every 2 years? Just one. Every 2 years. If we could move that 45% participation up, even a few percent a year, we wouldn't be asking questions like we asked 2 hours ago of if General Counsel cuts and our staff don't have the money that we need for our staff, what will we do? I, of course, was sitting at table number 2, jumping out of my skin, saying, if we could move M&S back, those cuts that were made by M&S donors wouldn't be passed on back to the conference office. So there's potential there for that one. We'll talk about that again in another minute. But it's interesting. So what if we spent more time as a church being really thankful and appreciative for the $300 million, for the $30 million, and for the $12 million? What if we spent more time thinking about the huge impact on God's work? Yes, we've got some cards coming up, some agree cards. The huge impact on how much of God's work we're able to carry out. And so I really loved Margaret McCain's presentation today. And I'd suggest there's another item that we might add to her list of huge accomplishments of the United Church. And I'd say enormous generosity of the people involved to carry out God's work. And then the other question I'd say for those that are saying, well, the church is going to be smaller than it was in the 60s, when you think of what she said about how important the United Church is in social justice, my question back would be, how big a church do we have to be to do a great job in social justice and do a great job across Canada and around the world? Absolutely. We can do fantastic work, whatever the scale, because of who the people are in the United Church and what our shared values are in the church. So that's the end of graph time. I'm sure you'll be relieved. So what if we had a plan where we were all pulling together and we supported stewardship all in one model, all in one sort of conceptual, pulling together, working together. There wasn't this over here and that over there, but it all fit together in all the pieces. And that's sort of what Nora and the church hired me to do, is to create an integrated plan for revenue generation and for stewardship. So I just want to spend a few minutes sort of echoing the request from the Stewardship Committee to talk a bit about that. So what if our job is to maximize the generosity of the people across the church as we run the church of the present while we're building the church of the future? And so the objective for our group is to maximize all donated revenue to the United Church of Canada by increasing the active engagement in stewardship as a vital part of the faith journey. the words were chosen very carefully. It's not about fundraising no matter what. It's about stewardship as part of the faith journey, and it's about increasing all stewardship. So it isn't about national office going after the M&S fund only, because then we'll be competing with congregational funds. It's helping congregations to do the best stewardship program they can. And then as John F. Kennedy said, a rising tide will float all boats. If we articulate the mission and service really well and do stewardship really well, it'll all work fine. So we've got 6 strategies to do that. One is simplify and clarify the call to action. Fundraising language call to action is what you're asking donors and supporters and volunteers to do. Maximize stewardship throughout the church. Maximize mission and service giving through strong leadership and support. Maximize legacy and major gift giving. Maximizing the foundation's capacity to be a service and resource to congregations, presbyteries, and conferences, and develop the information base within the General Council Office to achieve 1 to 5. So that's our plan. It's gone to the Permanent Committee on Finance. Oh, you gotta love an organization that calls their committees permanent, don't you? So the Permanent Committee on Finance, and it's gone to the General Council Executive. And so if we spend a minute on each, number 1, simplifying and clarifying the call to action. So starting with a strong theological base, and a stronger theological base than our materials had before, really starting to look at stewardship and M&S. And you know what I think? I think we're doing something wrong and we don't even know it. I think of a fund that's as beautiful as the Mission and Service Fund, that does such great work, is only getting 45% participation. I think there's something we're missing. So we did this survey. A whole lot of you would have seen it. We said stewardship starts with listening. We're listening. And we asked stewardship leaders, M&S leaders, and ministers, what do you think about stewardship? What does it mean to you? What parts of the Bible speak to stewardship? Where do you think your congregation is on it? What do you think about M&S? And we asked basically what you would call leaders and gatekeepers in the church, the ministers, M&S leaders, stewardship leaders, a whole set of questions. We got a great response rate back, and we're now analyzing the results. The first quick look at the results is they're very positive. They're very positive around stewardship. There's some big differences between the lay leaders and the ministers. Our researcher said that was a problem because it was mixed messages, and I think it's not a problem. I think it's what you'd expect. The ministers, as you would hope with people that are trained theologically, saw stewardship as part of the faith journey as coming from their theology, as being grounded in the practice of being a Christian. The lay leaders saw stewardship as making sure the ministers' salaries were covered and the building was paid for and the lights were on. And so I said to the ministers, that's good news for the ministers, that the lay leaders feel that way. And it's not a surprise that those of us that aren't as trained theologically might not have the same approach, but still a strong sense of stewardship. When we looked at the M&S fund, and we asked a lot of questions about the M&S fund, and a whole bunch of questions you ask about a fund, and then you put them in order. And to use branding language, wow, what a strong brand. Number 1 and number 2, these leaders felt about the M&S fund. Number 1 was trust, and number 2 was alignment with United Church values. That's beautiful. That's decades of hard work get to trust and alignment with values. Down low, not doing so good on, is understanding where the money goes, understanding what it does, understanding the scope. That's information. We can probably work with that. If it was the other way around, we'd be in deep trouble. If they knew everything about it but didn't trust it, forget it. So really strong. And we even asked the rude question, should we have a unified fund, or is its time come and gone? And people said, majority strongly said yes, we should still have a unified fund like the M&S fund. Strategy number 2 is around maximizing stewardship throughout the church. And so this is nuts and bolts. This is what are the tools and resources congregations need to do a great job. This is how do we get all the resources we need online, so they can just go online, find it easily, print it out, and make use of it. This is about taking our workshops and putting them on the web. Susan Graham-Walker's already done a couple of great webinars on narrative budgets. And it's alignment of our message with stewardship and across the M&S. It's delivering through the web lots of tools and resources and doing lots of work to really help congregations to maximize their work. So it's focusing on congregations, and Susan Graham-Walker on our team heads that up from our office. And of course, when I say who's heading things up, in the Maritimes, our team member that's heading all of this up and supporting all of it and working directly with you, of course, is Pam Harrison, who you all know well. Know and love well, and you can hold up the strongly. And so it goes without saying when I mention all these areas that she's really your resource locally, but we've got lots of other resources supporting her and that can be supporting you as well. So that's the stewardship piece. The third is the mission and service. You will have noticed that we dropped the word fund. Maybe you didn't. We had a lot of funds. When I got here, we had funds for all kinds of things. And I looked at the mission and service and thought, this isn't the fund, this is the mission and service of the United Church of Canada. And so we're talking about it. All the others are really sub-funds of it. So you'll see on most of our materials, it's about the mission and service of the United Church of Canada. And the mission, in the word mission, isn't overseas mission. To me, it's mission that comes from the creed. We are called to be the church. The 5 things we're here to do. That's the mission and the mission and service, and we lift it right up next to the crest. So you'll see our materials talk about the mission and service of the United Church of Canada. It's up here. It's next to the crest. We've got a strongly agree back there. Thank you. So that's how we're articulating it. We're getting better information on it. We're really going to focus on increasing percent participation. Cheryl Curtis, who's heading up that area, has got a great plan for a lot of increased communication, increased conversation. She led the piece where the moderator hand signed the thank you notes to every single congregation for their mission and service gift last year, and there's a beautiful blog that he wrote about it. We're going to be working more on the tangible links between the congregation and the organizations that are being helped. We call that line of sight, where if when you make a donation, you have a line of sight through to where the money goes and what it's doing. And in the mission and service of the church, we need to do a better job on that. And we'll also be building gifts with vision and building our emergency giving capacity in that area. Again, like emergency giving, what generosity. Haiti happens, in addition to all the level of giving, poof, $3.5 million is donated by United Church members. Horn of Africa, $1.2 million. I mean, it's just incredible generosity. We've moved it online and got all of that, so it's a lot easier for you to do. But we're really going to be focusing on this and would love any of your thoughts on how we can express the mission and service campaign better. 4 is maximizing legacy and major gift giving. We've got a legacy giving initiative that Doug Flanders is heading up. It's going to be stronger integration with the other pieces that we're doing. And we will continue to balance short-term and long-term investments. But now with the foundation here, and now with the sale of properties, we're starting to be thinking more about long-term investments. And I'll get to that when we get to the foundation piece, which is next. And that's maximize the foundation's capacity to be a service and asset to all of you. So 2.5 years ago when I started, the foundation was at $4 million held inside. It's now at 13. By summer, it'll be at 40. In addition to that, 80 congregations, presbyteries, church organizations, and conferences have an additional $18 million co-invested with our investment manager. Great levels of return in a fund that's held up against the Janssy screen for social investment. It's a really beautiful plug-and-play opportunity for organizations that don't want to have their own investment committee and do all of that work themselves, just have the money in there. We've got like Manse funds that are set up that churches can be in and out of 20 times a year at no cost and getting great return on the dollar.
The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Eastlink TV, its sponsors, or partners.
management costs in those are 1.25%, and half of that is donated by the management company to the foundation to cover the costs of the foundation. So by this summer, the foundation will be covering all of its own costs. It was supported very generously by the United Church of Canada to get it started, but it's moving along beautifully. So you ask, what's the difference between the 4 and the 13 million? Mostly sale of properties. Mostly organizations saying, you know what, this property was a long-term asset that supported programming, our local ministry, and we'd like it to stay as a long-term asset to support our ministry. So most of it is sale of property, and most of it is being directed back to that community or that program. The largest is the Griffith McConnell sale of a seniors' home in Montreal. We now have a $5 million fund that's funding seniors ministry in Montreal, and all the funding decisions are made by a committee formed by the presbytery. So it's their money. They're distributing it how they feel best. And so people are making decisions. And I'm not saying it's the total of sale of property is going into this, but there are a lot of churches that are saying X percent of a sale of property ought to stay as a long-term asset and support the funding in our community. You know, probably like you, I watch a lot of David Suzuki on TV over the years. And you know, when a really large tree falls in the forest, it doesn't just disappear and go poof. All the bioenergy of that tree stays in that forest, right where it was, and becomes a nurse log, opens the sunlight so new trees can start up, and becomes a nurse log for the growth of all kinds of life. You know, sometimes when we sell a church, we distribute the funds to all the charities, sometimes other churches in the local community, and that log just went poof out of the United Church forest. And so what congregations are starting to do is say, maybe part of that log, when that building closes and we've got a sale of property, maybe a good chunk of that ought to be retained in the church. And what are the most important things in the church to be allocating that money to? Maybe some of it's endowed, maybe not. Maybe some of it's spent over 5 or 10 years. It's really the decision of that congregation or that congregation with that presbytery. But we're starting to take a different view. It's like the question here in the Maritimes, how do we support the dreams, the stories, the memories of the church, otherwise known as the archives? How do we support that? Well, there may be something around sale of properties where we say, there's long-term assets here that we can do some things that are really important and strategic to be doing with. You heard earlier from the Edge that the Project Greenbelt, 50 youth were going to be going with the moderator on this project, and the funding for those 50 youth actually came from the foundation. Actually, to be more specific, the funding for the youth came from the sale of property of a building in Montreal. That's where the money came from. Because somebody wrote and asked, how do we have money in M&S to send 50 people to England? Well, first of all, any organization that doesn't do R&D, research and development, and develop a new models for future goes under pretty quickly. And secondly, this was the choice of a group that sold a building, that 1.125 million would go in the new ministries fund to help the church find new models of church, to do new models of innovation. Here in the Maritimes, the Adult Go project received funding in the Maritimes, and Tatamagouche Centre had the United We Stand Towards Maritime Models of Comparative Ministry. Those were all funded by bequests. That was bequests that did that through the foundation. So we're really going to be focusing on innovative new models. Where are the areas of growth, like you heard in Edge? Where are the areas of growth in new church? Where are those little new seedlings springing up in the forest of the United Church that we can be supporting and developing? And it doesn't take huge amounts of money as we go through that. And so the last piece is developing the information base. That sounds really boring and tedious, like IT or something. It really isn't. It's mostly getting all the great stories of what's happening around the world and across Canada with the money that we're doing. It's providing that kind of a line of sight to donors on what's happening. So what if we did this and we worked together collectively, knowing the money belongs to the congregation, is within a Presbyterian conference, but supporting the generous stewardship and supporting the handling of the resources we do, and do it all together and do it all as a united church. Does that make sense? Any small cards? A few small cards. A lot of small cards. So that's what we're working on. So then moving on, just wrapping up in the last few minutes, I was in Guatemala in January. I try and actually go out once a year. Last year I was in Haiti, and I told the stewardship meeting last year about what I saw in Haiti. And I'd like to tell you a little bit and bring you a thank you from Guatemala. I said I'd close with a thank you. And so what if these cute little guys and girls had a chance to do something their parents never had a chance to do? They live in a small village up in the mountains in Guatemala, and they have a chance to go to school. And so guess what the parents' concern is? How do we give them the best support, nutrition, clothing, family life, so they can get the best out of their education? And so the United Church had been supporting a group about a 4-hour walk away from this village. And there was a woman that walked from this village 4 hours to be in another group that the United Church was supporting. And she said, if I got a dozen women together, could we set up a group in our community? And so the group that the United Church funds said to these women, of course, we'd love to. Now these women had no education at all. And so they'd been told they were stupid, and they should stay in the kitchen, and they should just keep to themselves. Because they had no education, they were stupid and didn't have much to offer. And so we had a minister, we had a healthcare professional, and we had an agronomist, and a beautiful little agency that supports them. And the minister went in and worked with them on their own value, their own self-worth, how smart they really are, how inventive and industrious they really are, how clever they are, all role-playing because they can't read, and all working with themselves and their self-esteem and how they relate to other people, how they deal with their emotions, everything, really, really bringing them forward. The healthcare professional comes in, helps them with their own health, their own hygiene of their children, their family, and their community. All of a sudden, you've got a very different setting. The agronomist comes in and shows them how to plant crops in a way that will be more successful, how they and their children can plant the potatoes, how from growing different plants, they can have an insecticide that'll keep all the insects away, and they won't have to spray chemicals, and start growing their own crops, growing all their own things. And pretty soon they've got farms that are working well. They've got kids that are being healthier. The crowning piece, as you would guess, is a micro-lending, where they each have a steer. Each of the women has a steer, 7-month-old steer. They look after it for 9 months, and they sell it. And they sell that steer, and then they have the cash to look after their family. Now, as a fellow from Canada who enjoys eating beef, I said, so you each got 1 steer and you sell it, but you must have 1 or 2 for the group so that you can eat some beef, right? No, they said those are much too valuable to eat. They sell them. The difference is the fellow that comes with the truck that used to say, here's how much I'm giving you for the beef. Now they talk to the agronomist. He's a young guy, he's in his early 20s. He goes online and sees what beef is worth. And he tells them what beef is worth. So when the fellow shows up with the truck and says, here's what I'm going to give you for your steer, they say, well, not quite. Here's what the price is and here's what they're worth. And he said, well, I can't give you that. And they said, well, we can't give you the steer. Come back next week and tell us what the price is then. And all of a sudden, you've got a very different power dynamic with people that are looking after their families, are doing business, are really out there. So the thank you that I bring you is from this group. This is the same group, the mothers and the kids. And they made a really strong point of saying, go back to Canada and say thank you to all the people that supported this. They said, it is as if we have woken up. It is as if, and imagine they're speaking Mayan into Spanish and from Spanish into English, and they were so articulate. It is as if, as people, we have woken up. We can now look after our children and our families. We have money, we have food, and as people, we are all new people. Please thank the members of the United Church. And they said, understand, God will remember each one of you for what you have done to help us. Thank you all. And so I close with a thank you from the women and children and their husbands in Guatemala.
The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Eastlink TV, its sponsors, or partners.
This is what brought me here today. Last August, my dear friends, Harvey Gilmore and Jody Hutchison of Red Letter Counseling, came to visit me at my home in the South Shore of Nova Scotia, and they brought along my dear friend, Doug McCain. We've been friends for over 60 years. The purpose of their visit was to talk about a project they had undertaken, and maybe discussing whether it was possible to find some kind of synergy with Mount Allison University. The project? To raise $3 million to pay for the building erected by Maritime Conference for its archives and administrative offices. My three friends invited my opinion on the viability of a partnership with Mount Allison, given the university's historic relationship with the United Church and Methodism. Now, my response was quick and negative. I said I didn't think there would be much hope of getting Mount Allison to join hands with you. I might be wrong on that. We might be able to tweak that a little bit. We talked about it today. So it's still a possibility. The university does have a lot of challenges of its own, and securing the financing for their annual operations. But as for raising money for archives of any kind, to me, that is about as exciting as watching paint dry. And the best I could say to them was, well, good luck. And don't ask me to donate. On a scale of 1 to 10, the fundraising appeal of this project would be a -10. Anyway, that was kind of a very that was a real downer. I rained on their parade quite hard. But our conversation as friends moved into a discussion of fundraising in general. We shared fundraising stories from our collective years of experiences, our challenges, successes, and the lessons we learned. As I told you, I came to fundraising from both sides of the table, and I've experienced firsthand the challenges of tough campaigns, family violence, a ballet school, and believe me, those were an easy sell compared to raising money for archives. It had no heartstrings appeal for me. As I have told many, many groups, the key ingredient to successful fundraising is passion. One has to unearth the passion around an issue, an organization, a project. And fundraisers have to ignite the passion in donors, and then they have to find ways to keep fueling that passion. My friend Margot Franson, who was formerly the president of the Body Shop of Canada, now devotes her time fully to women's issues. And she describes her passion this way: I put my heart in my checkbook, and my checkbook in my heart. And this really would describe my feelings as well. I have to feel something in my heart. It wasn't in the archives. But we talked. We continued to talk and talk and talk. And we eventually got back to the United Church. And we began to zero in on what it is about the United Church of Canada that makes me feel passionate. I began to think about it. Archives don't excite me. But I began to realize there's a lot about the United Church that does excite me, that does make me feel passionate. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And I guess I really want to take you outside your little individual church buildings, in your congregations. Because what excites me about the United Church goes way beyond a church building and reaches out into the world at large. Bottom line, after 2 hours of talk, I had convinced myself. I was engaged, and I was prepared to give. And I was prepared to share my passionate belief about the United Church of Canada and its contribution, not just to your people, but to Canada, to society at large, to the world. And it's huge. I think it's bigger than any of you realize. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to describe my passion. Here it is. Among mainstream world religions, the United Church of Canada, which is the largest faith community in Canada, is a very young church. You all know the history, the merger of 3 denominations in 1925, Methodist, Congregational, Presbyterian. The United Church is only 87 years old. But although it is the youngest church in the world, its impact on the world is enormous. It's larger than any of you really, I think, fully comprehend. And it needs to be proclaimed. The United Church of Canada is a world leader in 2 critically important areas that mean something. They mean a lot to me. You have led the world as a faith community in human rights and social justice, and we must not ever minimize this. You have given to 2 important groups in the world, in society, to women, to gays and lesbians. You have given full acceptance. You have given full participation in church life. You have created a safe place for these 2 areas of human life. You have given them a safe place to experience spirituality. And when I process the magnitude of this, emotionally and intellectually, my passion is aroused. My feminist passions were aroused quite late. My mother was a single mother, and she was a feminist before I was. But she was widowed at 39, so I essentially was raised by a single mother. I was educated in an all-girls school and attended a female-friendly university. I went to a church that valued women. I did not experience anything that made me feel second-class or diminished. That was accepted. That was a given. The first woman ordained in the United Church was Lydia Emily Grundy in 1936. I was 2 years old. The United Church was the first major denomination in the world to affirm the ordination of women. Think of it. Just 11 years after the foundation of the United Church of Canada, they took this major step, leading the world in giving women full and complete affirmation and acceptance. So I grew up in this cultural environment, and it was only when I became immersed in the Anglican Church that I became aware that they did not, and in large part still do not, value and accept women in the same way. Yes, in Canada, the United States, and Australia, the Anglicans do ordain women and even consecrate female bishops, but this is not universal in the Church. The recent failure to pass resolutions in England, in the UK, to consecrate female bishops speaks to this discrimination. Look at the Greek, Russian, Eastern Orthodox churches. Women cannot go to the high altar. We're all aware of the situation for women in the Catholic Church. They're struggling to gain full participation, and probably I will never see it in my lifetime. Fundamentalist churches still discriminate against women. Some even inflict stringent dress codes on women, forbidding them to wear pants, cut their hair. All this in the 21st century. How many female pastors are there? In Islam and Orthodox Judaism, women cannot sit with men in the mosque or synagogue. And in many Islamic countries, women are forced to cower behind burqas and the chador, to be covered. And what about Orthodox Jewish women who have to shave their heads and wear wigs and walk behind their men? I was in Israel last September, and during the week of Yom Kippur and Sukkot, the high religious weeks, their services were totally exclusionary for women. I saw them because many of them took place in our hotel. The women couldn't go near them. In countries dominated by Hindus, women are definitely second-class citizens. They are persecuted, raped, terrorized, sacrificed in forced burnings and suicides. In all these countries, where Buddhism, Sikhs, all of them tolerate and accept these horrific acts of violence against women. Then think of the United Church of Canada, where women have full and equal rights and are able to participate in all roles of the church and are valued. How many of you really fully comprehend the enormity of what you have done for the women of the world and the messages you send? The magnitude of this statement to the world is huge. I know you carry out many, many, many other wonderful functions. You minister, you carry out your mission of ministry to the poor, the sick, the hungry, the homeless, the hurting people of our world. And you do that very well. You carry out your mission in developing countries, and you do that well. Other churches are doing that as well. But the way you value your women is where you are singular and unique. The empowerment of women resonates well beyond the walls of your church communities. It echoes into society at large and into the world. It does not go unnoticed in other faiths and causes more than a little discontent and unrest, but it's good unrest. But then, for the gay lesbian community, the United Church has been a beacon in a dark world. Your leadership worldwide on this issue of human rights and social justice, again, is far greater than any of you realize. Your moderator is gay. He's married. He spoke in my church. How great is that message to the world? Now, champions of the gay lesbian community, I have to mention my friend Doug McCain, who has been a champion and a leader, and Eldon Hay, and may I take a moment to thank them for their leadership on this issue. The canons of the United Church say that gays and lesbians are to be admitted to ordination. Yes, I wish you would clap. Their leadership means so much to me. The canons of the United Church state that gays and lesbians are to be admitted to ordination and to equal participation in the church. It is enormous. Think for a moment of the place of homosexuality and same-sex marriage in the Anglican Church, the Roman Catholic Church, the Baptist Church, fundamentalist churches, in Judaism, in Islam, Hindus, Buddhists, and Sikhs. Do you realize in 78 countries of the world, by your acceptance, by this statement, you could be in their countries, would be in danger of being imprisoned. And in 10 countries of the world, your support and your declaration would make you put you in danger of being executed. I realize there is still some discomfort level with this in some communities, maybe resistance. But your church has responded sensitively to these feelings and beliefs, and some congregations have taken the step of performing same-sex marriages as affirming churches, while others have not yet. And that's okay. Not great, but it's okay for now. It does not go unnoticed that the affirming churches, the inclusive churches among you, are thriving, and they are attracting young people. And this is where youth are going. The days of exclusiveness are over for youth. They actually find it intolerable. But what an example this church has set for the world. We are all created in the image of God, and people in the United Church of Canada do not deny science. They process it in their heads, they process it in their hearts, and in their theology. Though scientific proof related to sexual orientation is not totally definitive, it is getting close. Researchers are telling us that men and women do not choose their sexual orientation. They are proving that there is definitely a genetic or biological component, and before long, we will know very much more about it. I won't go into it, all those details, but we will know very soon. We will know for certain what contributes to our physical, mental, and sexual makeup. And when that happens, other faiths around the world are going to have very red faces. There will be many mea culpas and many trips to confession. But the United Church of Canada will hold its head high. I'm so proud of the United Church and what it is doing. Your social impact is enormous. It's a story that is large, it is important, it is critical to proclaim it to the world, and guess where that story resides? The story is held in the archives. It's bigger. It's a safe receptacle. It's an important receptacle. But let's not talk about archives. Let's talk about the United Church story. It's bigger than, well, not that we minimize all your other needs, demands, missions. They're all important. But if you don't allow the United Church as a whole to thrive in the world, to tell your story, to get out there, be proud, and hold your head up, what good is archives? So tell the United Church story. Tell it with pride. Preserve it. Protect it. It's important. So I am going to give to the archives after all.